Moore.
Here.
Alderman French. Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderman Carter. Alderman Green.
Here.
Chairman Conway.
Present.
6 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Today we have Board Bill number 221 in front of us. I would move that we adopt committee substitute for Board Bill 221.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we adopt committee substitute for Board Bill number 221.
For discussion.
For discussion. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cruzen.
Aye.
Alderman Behringer.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson. Alderman Moore. Alderman French. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Conway.
Aye.
6 aye votes, 0 no votes. Board Bill 221 committee substitute stands for swearing.
All right. I do have a sign-up sheet here, and I just know that things are a little tight in here, so instead of signing up, if you have something to say, I'll just recognize you, and then you'll come up and sit next to Mr. Vaccaro. Is that fair enough? All right. Alderman Vaccaro, you recognized on committee substitute for Board Bill number 221.
Okay, committee substitute 221, I've sent it out, and it's been revised a few times, but the latest one we got is the current one. What it does is, already in the charter, it calls for lowest best, or lowest responsible contractor. What this does is it describes what that contractor should meet, whether it's the minority participation, the training, all the descriptions of what what they should be looking for when they send these bids out. I think everybody in this room is familiar with when they sent the bid out for sidewalks. They went to a plaster company. The plaster company didn't have the ability to do the job, so then it went out for a rebid. And by the time the rebid came out, I don't know about anybody else, I didn't get any sidewalks, but I think a lot of other aldermen did not, because by the time the contract came out, it was too late to get sidewalks done. So all the money that I put in there doesn't happen now until next year, and all the promises I made don't happen. I had 2 incidents on the sewer lateral program in my area alone, and I'm sure other places, where the contractor doing the work, or in this case, I believe subcontractor doing the work, they dug through the phone lines, knocking out all the computers and everything in the alley. Didn't call Digrite, didn't shore it up, just kind of rushed through the job. I called Kent, he came, I complained about it, he said, well, we'll do something about it. The next week, not next month, not 6 months, same contractors were out, 4 houses down, dug through the same set of wires in the alley, and that was also, and then I'm the one that gets yelled at. And so, and I would have to say too, like the contractor that came in for, AT&T when the building blew up in the Central West End. Also saying is, when the city, all I'm asking is when the city sends out bids for work, and this is not building things, it's work that we haven't done, sidewalks, sewer levels, stuff like that the contractor have some knowledge in the ability to do the job. So we're saying that they should have OSHA training, should have, whoever the supervisor or superintendent or the lead tradesman, the way this says, should have OSHA 30 training, which is a little bit more than the OSHA 10 that's required by everybody else that works. So they should have some knowledge of safety procedures and, again, I can only go to the handful of examples that I gave, but, when they're doing these phone lines, doing these sewer laterals, and they're digging through phone lines, they're not putting the proper showing up. And when I try to get an answer, I get none. I'm frustrated, and that's why, this was a bill that went through in the county, and so I took it from the county bill, and then Craig and Dave helped me rewrite and write it, and then rewrite it again. I kept sending out every time we had the originals and then the changes. I kept sending it out, asking for people to either co-sponsor. The people who had questions did call me, and I tried to address them in the changes. a lot of the changes had to do with it, so we eliminated Board Bill 222, because a lot of changes had to do with stuff that had to do with ordering asphalt, ordering salt, so we took all the supply stuff out, and the only thing this bill pertains to is what's considered a responsible contractor. And Craig may need to help me on that.
Yeah, you just give me 1 second. And Alderman Schmidt is a co-sponsor.
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. First of all, yes, Alderman Vaquero had 2 board bills. The first, and both of those were adopted in St. Louis County. St. Louis County obviously has a different system than we do. So the concept was great, and a number of us were interested in jumping on, but the legislative language didn't make a lot of sense. I don't practice law, but years ago I used to help to write legislation, and so I thought I would take a stab at it. Obviously, our counsel and other folks looked at that and then had to make changes as well, because he is an attorney. So 220, there were 2 board bills. One was specifically dealing with supplies. Another one was dealing with public works and letting those out. This board bill, 221 committee substitute, only deals with public works, because our portion of the charter, section 4 of article 22 of the city charter, currently talks about the lowest responsible bidder when you're talking about public works projects. That language is not in the supply section when we're talking about that within our charter. It might be helpful to have that, but if we were to have that, then we would have to go to a vote of the public to try to do that, and that might be something that people would look at down the road. So what this then does, as Alderman Vaquero indicated, is define what lowest responsible bidder means. And so primarily that begins on page 3, line 21 and 22, and then goes on from there. So obviously we all care about price, but in addition to price, there are other things that can raise the price or affect the quality and how well we are using taxpayers' money. So those things that are defined here are pretty much what was defined in St. Louis County, which is whether they're capable, they have the capacity and skill to provide these services. Alderman Vaquero pointed out some situations where that wasn't the case, and that cost time and money potentially to the city because we didn't have those things in place, and the Board of Public Service really couldn't look at those because the only thing they were looking at was price. Whether they can do it promptly, character and reputation of the bidder, the quality in past contracts, the financial capacity of this person, the availability of supplies, all of these things. I will point out that we have added something that's very important to our city of St. Louis. I'm not sure that this was really focused on in St. Louis County, but it's important to us. This is language taken directly from what Alderman Boyd had proposed in 2005 before the voters to talk about applicable requirements for minority and women business enterprises.
Where are you?
That begins on line 9
Of page,
of page 4.
thank you.
I would point out that at one point, we also indicated location within the city of St. Louis, so that might be added as well. That's indicated on lines 13 through 16, so it's in there. So we've kind of said it twice, but we really want to highlight that that's something that they really need to look at. Because, it's great to protect taxpayers' money, but if we don't have any taxpayers because they don't have any jobs because we're not giving any contracts to people who are local, who have that ability and can comply with all this, then we're sort of shortchanging ourselves. So then, in addition to that, on page 5, it talks about what the the bidder has to send out in terms of a statement, a notarized statement in terms of how they're trained, whether they've had their contracting license suspended. There are issues about trying to make sure that it's not an egregious or an onerous burden but it would be helpful to have folks who are OSHA certified, who are actually doing the supervision for the 30 hours, and those will be the project supervisors as well as the workers being OSHA trained. So the idea is that you don't want to have a situation where we're getting the lowest bid because we're shortchanging safety of the workers who are out there in the field, or we could be shortchanging even our public safety because they're not trained in this. In addition to that, there's apprenticeship training that they have to indicate that they're doing, that they're not just being sort of the cover for this and subcontracting all the work, so that we really don't know with whom we're contracting. So then it then also defines what these various items are: independent contractor, supervisor, subcontractor. So what this bill attempts to do is to take what St. Louis County did, put it into the language for our charter, focus it specifically on the public works projects, because that already has the language in our charter for lowest responsible bidder, and go from there for that, because we can do this as quickly as the Board of Aldermen would like to do that, to try to make sure that we are getting the best bang for our buck, not just on price, because sometimes that is not the only route to go, because you can get a better deal for the taxpayer by getting a good product that is reasonably priced, rather than the lowest price that is a lousy product.
Okay, and on section 3, we didn't talk about section 3. Someone please.
There is no section 3.
Yeah, it's gone.
There's no
Isn't
section
that
3.
taken out?
It took out all of that.
Yeah, so the idea is this: we did not want to create something, so here's what could happen, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, no, Mr. Chairman, the idea is whatever policies we have here in the city of St. Louis with regard to women, minority, and local resident requirements are thereby incorporated into this in determining the lowest responsible bidder. We've already done that. We may do that in the future, and so however that's defined will be how lowest responsible bidder for that aspect will be defined, as opposed to putting it here and then it changes or whatever. So we wanted to reflect back on some of the efforts that Alderman Kennedy and others, I know a number of us, including myself, have joined on to those, and many people in this room have joined on to those, that we include that as a major part of this effort, that needs to be taken into consideration as well when the lowest responsible bidder is being reviewed.
And then why did we take out the old section 3?
Because it defined it, and we've defined it in other legislation, and we'll likely define it again in the future, perhaps to have even greater percentages that are required. So we didn't need to have that, we already have it. And it's reflected in the earlier section, which is what, section 2? Section 1, it's in section 1. You know, when we talked about it on
Right into
page
that
4,
one.
page 4, lines 9 through 10, and then line 13 through 16. By the way, one thing I didn't talk about, in St. Louis County, they have this as well. If you don't take the lowest price, then you do need to file a report in terms of exactly what other factors you're making your decision on. I think that's only fair, because somebody might say, well, you decided without any basis not to take the lowest price. They have to indicate specifically what aspects of this they took into consideration when they were looking at the lowest responsible bidder. I think that's only fair. And St. Louis County is doing that. So there would have to be a full and complete statement of the reasons for placing the order elsewhere, prepared. It shouldn't be by the agent, it should be by the BPF. I think that was something we wanted to change on line 12 on page 4.
put some kind of backup truck out.
With the concurrence of the city councilor, and that gives them the legal backing that they need for that report.
And
We
then,
tried to change agent everywhere because we don't have an agent.
right, but our current workforce participation
It's defined.
is defined.
Right.
But on that $1 million contract threshold, was it previously 5 million?
No, it was, I believe it's currently 1 million, that's Alderman Kennedy's legislation, it's 1 million.
Okay,
Whether that's a TIF or
all right, so you were just replicating that language.
reflecting that language in this bill, yes.
All right. Alderwoman Crusoe.
Thank you. I sympathize with the Alderman from the 23rd about
Hmm.
having contractors performing work in the ward that, to a layman, and I'm not a contractor, don't appear to be, maybe to be qualified or to be able to get back and finish up their job and that sort of thing. So I sympathize with that. I've been reading the various versions of this bill for, I don't know, a week or 2 or 3 or however long it's been.
Me too.
And I'm still struggling with some of the language in here. So maybe I can just ask a little bit about that. Before I do that, has the city councilor reviewed this committee substitute?
I have sent this, I think, Mr. Patrick, I've sent it. I haven't
You've
had
sent
any
it
answer.
to,
Patrick, he said it's at the city councilor, but none of.
so
none of-
not yet?
He has not come back to me with anything, but, you know,
So they haven't I mean, they haven't,
I,
apparently they haven't completed the review yet. Would
I
that be
assume
right?
not. I haven't heard anything from them.
And what about the Board of Public Service? Have they reviewed this committee sub? Because
Everybody-
they're gonna have to,
Right,
you know.
everybody has it. But you know, I haven't received any kind of answers other than, you know, yeah, you talked to him. I mean, I can't say that comment, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Patrick.
Let me finish this, I guess. Well, I would, personally, I'd like to see, Board of Public Service is gonna be the entity that's gonna have to actually, you know, do this. It won't be us administer this. So I'd like to hear from them that they're good with that, if that is in fact the case.
Well, I mean, the
So-
problem is, I'm not getting any answers back. And really, I've asked questions on this for over 3 weeks. You know,
Well, it's changed a lot.
well, and every time it changed,
Okay,
I kept
so,
getting.
I don't wanna those would be 2 things for me. I really do wanna see the Board of Public Service adopt somehow or another some either pre-qualifications for bidders and, a combination of merit-based, well, low price and merit-based evaluation of contractors. I mean, I think that's pretty essential to get the best thing for our city. Now, let me ask a couple of quick questions here and get to the right. I would just point out that on page 3, let's see if I got the right version here, page 3, line 23, what this is saying is that in determining the lowest responsible bidder, in addition to the price, the agents shall consider,
Yeah, it should be BPS.
okay,
It's supposed
so,
to be BPS every
yeah.
year.
Their agent is in here in 2 places.
Right, it should be.
So then the agent has to consider, if you read the list of things that come after that, 10 things, or the BPS has to consider 10 things. 3 or 4 of them sound kind of alike to me, but,
Maybe it's
so those 10 things, they shall consider it. Not that they may consider it, but they shall consider it. I wonder if that was a question in your mind, whether it should say may, shall.
Not really. Again, I took it off what passed in the county, and then
Okay,
I went to Craig because, you know, it comes with writing in the legislation.
okay, okay.
You know, I count on.
So
Dave.
then, if you go to page 4, line 10, it starts out, says, when the award is not given to the lowest bidder, a full and complete statement of the reasons for placing the order elsewhere shall be prepared by the agent, so by BPS. with the concurrence of the city council and filed, you know, with the other papers. So we wanna change that. Now, then it goes over to, and I'm glad to see that we added the language in here about, complying with all of our policies, but it goes over to page 5. And it's number 2A. And it says, as to construction projects, the lowest responsible bidder, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't say construction projects of what size, it just says all construction projects. So, for example, there's a little street marker thing along Skinker. I think MSD ran into it, but they deny it. But anyway, somebody ran into it, knocked it over, okay? So, the Board of Public Service, of course, wants me to pay for fixing it. It's $4,289 or something, they just sent it to me yesterday, other than fussing with them about really who should pay for that, okay, which is still a conversation. But this would apply to whoever it is that's gonna, it's a little stone thing that got knocked over, and this rock's gonna have to be, you know the difference in
Right.
rocks and
No,
stones?
no, I do. And-
A stone you have to pay for, you have to buy, rocks you have to pay someone to haul away. So anyway, I moved your coffee.
Kind of asserted herself.
You were here,
Stones you have
Mr.
to pay
President.
Stones
Yeah, stones are fancy, you have to buy
Oh,
those,
okay,
rocks, you have to
okay,
pay
yeah,
someone
yeah.
else to haul them
Oh,
away.
right. Okay, right.
So,
and-
so anyway, what I was gonna say here is, so that's a little construction project,
Right,
and that would have to comply with this.
right. And the reason being, I'll go back to sewer lateral. Because most of the sewer laterals are probably somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000.
Right,
And, that was right in my line of,
okay, all right, so you intend for every construction project to comply with this.
I think they should,
All right,
I
so-
think they should.
So, then you come down here to line 8. It begins, and it says, so that every contractor would need to participate in their own DOL-approved apprentice program, and they have to actually have active registered apprentices in their program. So I'm just wondering if the small contractor, I don't know how easy it is to have an apprentice program, and, you know, does every contractor have an apprentice? I'm thinking that they don't, so not having a size in here, and I do I agree with you, Joe, on the lateral sewer thing, Alderman. But I'm just really worried about the, you know, small projects, 50-50 sidewalk maybe, that I don't think they're gonna all have apprentices.
Well, and again, when they hire plaster workers, they can't
Well,
even
that's
complete the
obviously
job.
bad, yeah,
And then it has to go out for rebid.
right.
And then, again, when I tell somebody, you're gonna have, I know I couldn't get you in last year, but you're gonna get done this summer. They don't blame BPS.
I agree that we should have
They,
this bill,
they come
which
back
is,
to me and they yell at me saying, hey, Joe, you promised that you were gonna get my sidewalks done, and I have to sit there and go, well, tell them the whole long story of how we hired plaster workers that didn't get the job done, that, you know, but I'm the one that takes the flack, which I'm sure you are too, but I mean, when it comes down to it, so we start putting this.
So anyway, here, but let me go back. I agree with the premise of this bill, which is to have qualified contractors do the work. Then my concern comes in, okay, well, what is the definition of qualified? They have to have an apprenticeship program and they have to have apprentices. The second thing is, all of their employees have to be licensed.
Well,
Now,
and-
there are a
and-
lot of workers.
Right, and that's something that we may.
Let me get my
hit-
question
Yeah,
out.
I'm sorry.
Let me get my question out. I mean, I'm just, you know, there are a lot of employees who license, I sure hope all the electricians and the plumbers and the, you know, but they have laborers who probably, I don't think there's a laborer's license.
They're not.
Maybe there is, I
Carpenters
don't
are
know.
not licensed. That was point, carpenters are not licensed, painters are not licensed.
Okay, but it's
So
still
there
in this
was-
bill.
Right, and, you know, I'm sure there'll be a floor substitute to this bill. I thought, what? get it out of committee as it
Okay.
is,
It
and
says
then,
with the
Alright.
appropriate licensing authority, so if there isn't one, you're actually licensed.
It does say that, but it also says that all employees will be licensed with the appropriate licensing authority. I mean,
Right.
I mean, maybe that's clear, maybe not. You think it is? Okay. Let's see here, let me get to my, this was my first draft. This is just something that I'm uninformed about, and that is, if, under the 50/50 sidewalk program, let's assume they're not plasters, but they're actually concrete guys, would it be normal for all of those employees to be OSHA certified and their supervisor to have 30 hours of OSHA? I mean, is that normal?
I don't know if it's normal, but if, you know, I would hope that somebody working on a construction site, whether it's sidewalks, because they're using backhoes, they're digging out,
Yeah.
they're using jackhammers and stuff. I would hope that they have training in, I mean, you don't want me out there busting up sidewalks. I mean, I would feel that anybody doing a
Okay.
sidewalk should have some training. I mean, again, the guy with the backhoe operator
Yeah,
that digs that up,
clearly,
you know.
clearly.
so-
Yeah,
so,
I'm not really talking about him, I'm just talking about the
The
guy,
guy-
who's out there that is, I don't know.
Yeah, finisher, that's doing the finisher.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe he's just.
Picking up the rocks.
Picking up rocks, yeah,
Well,
or
but,
whatever, yeah, I don't know, so that, okay, so that's a question. Then, I think that could be addressed if, possibly by including some size on this, but allowing for, BPS to also, you should still have to have qualifications, to do any of these jobs. And I do know about the sidewalk problem, I had the same thing. I'm sorry, I'm backing up here. This is my last question. Let me see where it is in the new bill. It is, I'll come back to it. Other people can ask
I'll come
questions.
back to you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Behringer.
Thank you. Craig, I appreciate you talking, because it did clarify some of my questions. So, well, first of all, Joe, anytime they tell me my sidewalks will be done in fall of 2015, I tell them 2016.
well, then.
Just so you know, I add a year no matter what to 50/50.
Well, you know what, my problem is I believe what they tell me, and some of the sidewalks that should have been done this year actually should have been done the year
No,
before.
I know, I'm 2 years behind.
And
2 years
so,
behind.
I don't wanna say that the Board of PPS is going to do these sometime. My constituents in my neighborhood want service. They don't want well, we're gonna do it 2 years, maybe 3, well, and then they start, I get the email, I'm sorry if you don't.
Yes.
Deserve service.
That's right.
Right, absolutely, and, well, I'm speaking for mine in a second, but I'm the one that gets yelled at. I mean, I'm the one when they call up, and if I say, well,
Okay,
call-
okay, stop. And the reason I say that is because we've all clarified we have this problem.
Right.
It's not new, but here's one of the reasons we have the problem. We go with the lowest bidder,
Right.
and the
Right.
lowest bidder
Isn't the best
isn't
bidder.
qualified.
Absolutely.
So what I wanna know is if this bill makes it so we can finally say, we want the lowest responsible, who can actually do the work,
And that's what this.
without increasing the cost, because that's one of my biggest chunks of money, for my capital money is 50/50.
Well, here's where I'm at.
No,
This
can
does-
you answer the question, Craig?
Yes, not only says it, which it currently says, but it's not defined, and so BPS has been going with price as the lowest responsible bidder. So this defines it,
Okay.
and certainly it could be changed. I understand it, if I can back up on the apprentice thing, I think that's something to work out with folks, because it could be based on the size of the contract or the size of the contract. I guess the concern would be not letting somebody do 50 different contractors to try to get around these kind of things.
Right, Right, but when we bid out for 50-50, it's for the whole city. They sit down, it's for the whole city, so
Or
it's a
it
big
has
chunk
been
of
like
money.
maybe 3 or 4
It's
for
not.
every city. Right, that's
Chump
correct.
change, it's huge.
Right.
Okay, so,
Right.
that was my, but without increasing the cost, that was my concern, is that it's gonna cost me more money.
Well, you know, it's possible that the price that the person puts in is gonna be higher. The
Mm.
question is, at the end of the day, are we actually paying less because we're getting the product that we deserve and want in a timely way with the safety of our employees and hiring people that are local and minorities and women? So I mean, those are all issues that we have. So
Yeah.
it might not be, you know, you might not get that bargain basement price, but we're ending up paying more ultimately because we're taking just price lower.
Right. No, I'm not, I mean,
Right.
if it goes up a little, that's not my concern. I just wanna make sure it didn't like double it or anything. That's what was my thing. And then the only other thing I had was that, when we talked about the, hold on, sorry. On page 4, line 14, I just wanna make sure I understand this correctly. I just wanna make sure I understand it, cause I got confused on that section, cause this was the whole idea, I thought behind the legislation, was that this makes it so we don't have to go out to rebid, that we re-advertise for the bids, that we can actually go to the next contractor that was on that particular list. Cause it says right here, BPS shall re-advertise for bids,
We're-
unless the public interest will not permit it to delay. So defining the best in the public interest, to me, would be holding up the work. I'm
Alderwoman,
just-
could you tell me where you're at again? I'm sorry.
Page
Oh,
four.
page
You're getting-
4.
You're moving a little fast for my
Lines
ears.
13 to 15. I just wanna make sure, cause in my head, if I understand this correctly, this says that the Board of Public Service shall re-advertise for bids unless the public
That's a
interest will
different
not permit
version,
this
yeah,
delay.
different version.
What?
She needs a committee substitute.
You're reading the last one.
Well, it's in this
No.
one too. It's, let me find the,
This is the one that was,
But the problem
Okay,
is,
sorry.
we all got all these other versions,
Yeah.
and if we're gonna read it before we get here.
I think ultimately what we had.
Hold on for one, let me get the committee substitute thing. Confirmed. Is there some demarcation on this committee substitute that we can reference so everybody knows they got the current copy in front of them,
I
Dave?
handed them out.
The way to see it is this one, the one Dave handed out is older
Mhm.
and a little different spacing
huh?
than this one. That's the committee that's one.
Where's your other one?
This is my old one.
Okay, let me just do something while you guys.
Is there more than one committee substitute?
There was,
There were.
There were.
It was resent to the committee, it was changed. So yes.
So this is the current committee. This is the.
I don't know what you have.
Probably sent out early.
Okay, so anyway, the way you can differentiate,
So we're gonna use that one?
Line 11.
okay, just everybody would listen for a second. Alderman, thank you. If you have the version on page 2 where line 23 is struck through all the way, then that is the current version. And that's the one we're talking about today.
Okay, sorry. The one that was on my desk.
Hold on, Alderman. Alderman, did you have a response, Alderman?
I did to her question, and that is, at one point, the language was in there about reletting the bids if there was a tie bid. That was in the language from St. Louis County. That was taken out because we didn't want to recreate what the process already is with BPS.
Okay.
We already have a process when there's equivalent bids, so we didn't need to give you more.
Okay. That was it for me. Thank you.
Alderman Moore.
The reason why I'm down here today in 1974, 75, construction ran me down here because of these very types of meetings. There is so much going on with this bill, it's all over the place. Because of the unfairness that has happened and is still occurring, we have this type of situation. In 2014, we're still eliminating minorities. we need inclusion. We don't have enforcement. And in 2014, we're still, the lowest bidder is gonna be the minority bidder, and he's automatically out of it. Are we training contractors to become, lower bidders, or what are we doing? This is absolutely amazing that we're sitting here in 2014 talking about diversity, and it says on line 6, page number 1,
2015.
line 6, where it says to create a skilled workforce that reflects diversity of the population of the city. So if the population of the city is a majority black, then we should have a workforce that portray that. And we don't have that. And this, when we finish with this bill today, 20 years from now, my grandson will be sitting here talking about the very same thing. It never worked. It's not gonna work, and it never worked, but I'm here to support whatever little bit we can edge out and get out of this deal. In 2006, we put in ADA curbs all the way down Martin Luther King. Just last year, they come back and said that the federal government had made a mistake and took them all out, put in some new ADA curbs. There was a company, I don't know what the name, TBS or whatever, a minority or female company came and did the work. She had 18 white guys working down Black Martin Luther King, a neighborhood with 99, I have 4 white guys in my community. And I'm not talking about black and white, because my best friend is a white guy, Craig Smith. But
Is that an endorsement?
I want you to know that. I love you dearly. But we have a problem. So I called the company and asked the lady, what is it why you don't have any black guys working, even just shoveling up the gravel, doing something? She told me that she had forgot. Literally forgot, and hired 5 white black guys on the spot on the job. But we were taking pictures of these guys working so that we can have the proof that it was 14 white guys on one curb. The guys were flexing their muscles and hollering, you know, doing the Popular Bluff hall call. You know, when you hear it say yeehaw, it's time for all the black guys to leave the crowd because there's too much beer being dispensed. But these guys were flexing so and was all in my face, and I just had to tell them, I said, listen, sir, this is not Ferguson. This is the Ville, and we will beat you up. I mean, we had to get dirty with them in order to get something done. But it's just to say that we need to create a workforce that reflect the diversity or reflect the St. Louis, then we got it all backwards.
Okay,
Well, can I-
hold on,
Just one
Alderman. Hey, just hold on. What I think I'll do is, that, you know, I know that some of the unions are represented today. I think I would ask them to speak as to what they're doing when we get done. And right now, I'm gonna let Joe respond, but right now at a committee meeting, we ask questions. You'll have an opportunity to speak, but I will ask one of these gentlemen to speak to their minority outreach and what they're doing to bring minorities and contractors on board with licensing in the unions.
Mr. Chairman, when I finish speaking, I don't need anybody to say anything else. They can go on with the next question. In 1980, I had a union carpenter company. In 1980 was my corporation. So what they're talking about and the diversity and all that is, you know, I'm just giving my opinion. I know we're asking questions, but I don't need, Joe, you don't even have to speak if you don't want to.
No, I do, all I wanna say, Rallo Construction Company had the bid on the sidewalk. In my neighborhood, they complied because I wanted them to comply. So I would say I could say all, and probably pretty much right on the money, of the contractors that did the sidewalks in the 23rd Ward were minority companies. It was Rallo Construction, but it was minority subs and stuff that did all the contracts. Now these guys that were doing the work, and I guarantee you call Mike Woodling because he was running the jobs for Rallo. those guys that were the minority people working in my ward doing the sidewalks, and I promise you, we can go back before it hits the
But
floor.
we only talking about sidewalks.
No, I'm just talking, I'm talking about sidewalks.
I know, I like Mike.
But the company that would fit into this, that had the minority participation, is now out of the program for the plaster company, and now it's a whole nother company in there. I'm just saying
Well,
that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna
Yes.
say this last thing.
I'm-
If we get one black guy working out of this bill, I'm satisfied, because we get nothing out of the deal. We keep getting the crumbs that's put on the table. I've been to so many diversity meetings, I feel like I'm mixed. It is horrible, and it's unacceptable to what's going on in here, and it's just, it's not gonna work, it's not fair. I don't know why we came up with this bill, because what we have on the table not working, and to put BPS in charge, whoop-de-doo. We're really gonna get somewhere. Thank you.
Alderman French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think when I see bills like this, what bills like this are all about is jobs. It's about determining who gets the jobs and who doesn't get the jobs. And so this version is a little different than the first version. A lot of stuff has been scratched out, but the stuff that remains still makes me worry about the effect, especially on minority contractors and just small, very small companies, of who gets these jobs and who doesn't. First, I'm concerned that we don't have, it seems, I don't think we have a representative from the minority contracting community here to talk about the effect that they think this bill would have on their members. But even in just looking in some of the language, for instance, the ban on companies that get these contracts from hiring independent contractors, then the definition of an independent contractor. What we know is that that is often how minorities get hired on these jobs, as independent contractors. That's often how you see your minority representation on these jobs. They've been hired as independent contractors because their companies can't meet the requirements already. And what we're doing now is adding a whole new level of requirements that's gonna make it even tougher for some of these smaller companies. So we could talk a lot about the specifics of the bill. I just think that it is important to have representatives from the minority contracting community come and testify before we pass this bill out of committee, to testify how they think this would affect minority hiring and some of the companies, smaller contractors that they represent. I think it's important to hear that perspective.
Alderman Carter.
In section 4, the lowest responsible bidder section, how does the agent determine the capacity of a bidder?
Okay, let's go back. On page 2, let me just ask you, Alderman Carter, on page 2, at the bottom, line 23, is there a line through that whole line of what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Huh?
there is a section for, what page are you on?
2.
I think page 2's out altogether.
But I was talking about, okay.
Page 2's completely out. Most of page 3 is completely out.
Okay. No, I was just on 2. Okay. Well, no, I mean,
I'm just trying to find out where you're
I
on.
think he means, if I may, page 3, line 23, what they shall consider, and that agent should be changed to BPS. Is that what you're talking about, Alderman?
okay, all right, yeah.
Is that correct?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay.
And
We've already noted that as an error.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what French said, I mean, we all know that most of the units, that they already have, well, they say that they have a problem hitting the 25 and 5 numbers, and that they hire the minority through independent contractors, and with this would prohibit that.
No, it doesn't, because it does have about the minority contractors, and with the rules that we adopted in Board Bill 75 apply. So we didn't specifically say, we said, because it was in there that way, and we changed it to reflect, so if
So page 5, line 12, it says, that there would be no use of independent contractors or, well, at least employees are scratched out, for on-site work.
Well, and again, I keep going, the reason a lot of this is in there goes back to my sewer lateral. I still, and maybe I'm very wrong about it, but it seems to me that they have one master drain in there, and then a whole bunch of subcontractors, they 1099 that are not, you know, they just kind of are out there, you know, and you get so much to do the job. Now, can I prove that? No, but what I see out there, I have issues with. And then when I try to talk to them, or even try to talk to Kent from the street department, I get no real good answers. So, you know, and I, you know, so the reason for the subcontractors, again, too, had to do with that if you have one contractor and he's just 1099 and a whole bunch of people. And again, this has got to do with work, not like a building, not like the community center. This has to do with work like sidewalks, sewer lateral. If the air conditioner goes out, who puts a running here? It's more to do with work that we send out, maintenance and stuff.
Can I ask you about, so why would this
Oh, we'll go in order. I will come back to you, Mr. French.
This is third.
It's so,
Okay.
it's okay. Craig may have to help me out.
Alderman,
Um,
this is a meeting, so let's do it like a meeting. Alderman Carter has the floor.
Well, I mean, it just seems to me that, that we are adding in extra, requirements, and it's making it tougher for minority, for MBEs and WBEs to acquire some of these, jobs, or even bid on them.
All right.
So,
Excuse me, Alderman, look, we have a lot of people in the room. I will let Mr. French ask more questions, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Alderman Carter, anything else?
That is it, thank you very much.
Okay. Alderwoman Green.
Say, most of my questions have been asked already. You know, the one, I guess, comment I would make is, you know, as we look at this, use of independent contractors clause that seems to be, you know, catching us up on, page 5, line 12. That's where the concerns seem to be, arising that we will cut out minority participation. I'm wondering if there is a way for us to, rather than say no independent contractors, define some kind of criteria for those independent contractors that falls within still being a responsible bidder.
but that's in here. That's in here. Craig may have to find the page, but
Okay.
it does
Then I'm not
say
seeing
that the independent contractor would have to conform to the same, you know, so it describes what an independent contractor is.
Okay, 'cause what I'm seeing says no independent contractors.
Right, it defines it on page 6, starting at line 9.
Well,
I don't believe that it necessarily eliminates getting another contractor to, you know, so you're sort of the general contractor and you let out portions of that business to a responsible entity that complies with all of this. But it would preclude somebody from pretending like they're a company, they come in and then they just go out and they do, you know, they get people who stand in line and they do the 1099 and they're not really employees or anything, they get no benefits, they're just sort of.
It just seems to me that those two clauses are contradictory.
They're not.
Okay.
It defines it specifically so that it doesn't include a situation where it would be another company or partnership or something like that.
Okay.
It defines
That's
it
a
in
It
band.
defines it as somebody who the IRS would treat as not being an employee of the person that we contracted with to do the job.
But it's just defining what it's banning.
Correct.
So it still bans it.
It does, yeah.
That's what I was getting at. So if the concern is that that ban will cut out minority participation, then how do we change that clause so that that consequence does not happen? Is there a way to assign criteria to independent contractors to make them fall within the responsible bidder, was outlined, all of the criteria that was top of page 4, to make independent contractors have to fall within those same guidelines, rather than saying no independent contractors.
It's a hard thing to achieve, but somebody might be able to define it.
Alderman, why don't you take about 5 minutes and think about that for me?
It's gonna be, yeah.
I'm trying to find the common ground here, cause I think at the basis, you know, this is a jobs bill. It will help us in our wards in making sure that our, projects are done correctly and not just cheaply. And we have to make sure that we are still meeting our minority participation, within it, and that's, you know, that is my one concern. And so if we can address that one line in some way to ensure that that does not get cut out, I'm much more at ease.
Okay, just hold that thought, Alderman, think about that for me for a few minutes. And, yeah, I don't know what the normal order is, but I'm sorry, Mr. President, your name's last on my list. You know what, next time you're in the room, I'll put you at the top.
No, that's fine, that's fine. You know, we've looked at various different versions of this bill across the years, and this is one of the better ones that have made it to committee and been discussed, you know, here today. And you know, in one of my former lives, like Alderman Moore, I was a contractor, and in that capacity, I was a union contractor. But in that capacity, I know that it was sometimes very hard to win those contracts because the big guys, you know, like the guys I would bid against, like Tarleton and those guys, they can drop their profit margin down to 2% or 1%, right, to get the job. And for me to stay afloat, I had to have a profit margin, so at the end of the day, I can, you know, pay my rent, keep my lights on, and everything else. So I could not, a lot of times I could not be the lowest bidder, which is what they would always beat us there, because their cost of insurance, they would volume buy, you know, all the materials. They can buy more materials at a cheaper rate than I would, and I was paying retail a lot of times for it. So it was very hard to compete as a minority contractor and get the jobs. So, you know, I think it's good to have, you know, a bill that allows us to look beyond just the lowest price, because you know what's happening in practice is that a lot of these guys are getting their legs cut out from under them because of some of the big guys can come in lower whenever they want to on these things. Second thing is when we look at some of the you know, some of the other things like if we're going to have more African American and women and Hispanic people, whatever, working on the job, and we still have not seen that yet, right? We have to really continue to push for that boots on the ground, diversity in the boots on the ground. And we always we always continue to push to make sure, okay, we got a minority business doing it, but that minority business may hire all non-minorities on the job. And at the end of the day, that's impacting people all throughout our wards, right? But when we get those folks on the job, we want them to make a good salary. So we're saying if it's being done by taxpayers' money, let's make sure that they are getting paid prevailing wage, because that allows them to begin to lift their families out of the positions that they're in. So I don't think that this bill on its own, without something else backing it up, that continues to shore up, or not shore up, continues to expand and reach out and bring more people into the workforce, you know, it is just, this is one component of it by itself, it doesn't do it all. So I think we have to, along with this bill, we're gonna have to have some other backup legislation that begins to open up, you know, the apprenticeship programs and things like this, and give preference to some of the people throughout the city, so that we just don't have people in here from Poplar Bluff or whatever, right, that are coming in here working off of 1099, they're not on our, you know, we're not getting earnings tax or anything else from them, and then boom, they're gone, right? And and we end up, you know, just holding, you know, paying the bill for it. So that's the way I'm viewing this bill, from being on both sides of it, from trying to fight this thing from one side as a minority contractor for years, and then also from seeing it from a legislative side. I know Sal Martinez and some of those folks, I believe Sal has taken a look at the bill. I think he supports it. He said that it was a good bill, is my understanding. I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen anything that he said in writing or anything like that. This is just from conversations. But I know he was gonna send some information on it from MCI. You know, obviously, the bill needs some more work. We would, I think some of the questions that you raised with dollar amount and those things we can work on. And work to come up with a really good floor substitute that takes into account some of these issues, so that at the end of the day, we end up with a good piece of legislation that's gonna work for us, right? And it's what you were talking about, Alderman Moore. At the end of the day, it needs to be more than just words. It has to be something that will work, right? And we can get there. We'll get there. But this has come as close to any of the previous 4 or 5 versions that we've seen, you know, down here. And some of you have seen every single version of these things. But you know, I think we're getting at least closer to what could be a really good bill.
All right. We're just gonna go in order, and I'm not gonna miss anybody. Since we didn't have the sign-up sheet, Alderwoman Davis, did you have any questions?
I just wanted to offer, first of all, some knowledge of where some additional information is to make this bill more appropriate for the intent. Based on how it is constructed now, no matter how you read it or interpret it, it's going to hurt minorities. It's just going to do that. It puts them in jeopardy because most of them do not have the ability to have all their employees unionized. They don't have the ability to be the lowest bidder. They don't have a lot of abilities that are indicated here that must be applied. Fortunately, I've been on both sides of this, whether I was at the top of an organization that let millions and millions of dollars of contracts out and set policy. And one of the things I found when I went to the school board was, even though we had a minority policy like we have here at the city, it didn't really help anybody get into the game. And so you have to put some additional tools from the city, and we have some we just started this past year. I think there's a loan pool available and some other things. But we have got to make sure that the legislation that we put out here is more pertinent to knowing what's happening versus, because you can tell people stuff all day and the job is done and over with, and it never happened the way you wanted it to. So we don't have enough oversight for contract compliance after the job is out there working. We don't have enough people to go out and do that. I do it in my ward. I will shut you down. I will threaten you with everything I have to threaten you with. And I don't care if you're spending private money. You cannot be over here and people in my community can't work. So those are the kinds of things we need to look at. And I would suggest that you look at the St. Louis Public Schools policy and the Housing Authority's policy. And I think you'll find some really good stuff to kind of help us get to where we're talking about having more inclusion and also having the better, more qualified entity doing the work. And I think that's one of the things you're also looking for in this bill. But this really doesn't get there. It just eliminates a lot and causes more confusion that we don't want to have. Because I can see some of those guys right now, and I know some of them been out there in the game a long time, they're gonna be here cracking us on our head about this bill, and we don't want that, we really don't.
But then you need to have.
So I would
a backup, you need
respectfully suggest that.
Well, I know, and you need to have a backup bill, but
Is there a question?
I was just answering it.
I just offered some assistance and some information, and I'd be willing to offer also my knowledge, and experience over the years in putting policies like these in place. Because I understand exactly where you're trying to go, and we want the best for our community, I understand that.
And I do have an answer
Yes, sir.
to the statement. So, in
I'm
the
a
last.
stand-in for the chairman who had to
Okay.
leave for a minute.
Yes. So, oh, stand by.
There's a short break.
So we need a short break.
Yeah, we stand by. So change tapes.
So, Alderwoman Davis had made a comment.
So in the,
Carl would like to respond.
in the last year, I have qualified with the minority contractor, I have qualified 3 minority contractors, and I can tell you 2 of which, because to become a union contractor, to be in a union is expensive. 2 of them are Wendell Hill Sons, I don't know if you know, but we got them qualified to minority. They actually became signatory with the Painters and Plasters Union, so that they're now a minority contract with them. Now, it's tough for them to get in because they have all these qualifications for bonds and stuff like that. They waived all that. I had a group that became signatory with the Glazers, and again, because of the costs of doing that, they waived all that so they didn't have to put up the big giant bond and all that. But they said as you're doing jobs, you can slowly pay this into that. So, and the third one was a sprinkler fitter, and I'm not sure, I know that my name's out there because I get a lot of calls as minority participants are trying to become qualified as minority, under the program. So they're recognized under the DBE, WBE program than the MBE program. And so I worked with 3 groups and have gotten that. And they, like I said, 2 of them, I can tell you for a fact. One is now on with the Painters and Plasters Union, and the other's on with the Glazers. And they waived a lot of that stuff. Because I went to them and said, hey, guys, look.
But Alderman, you got this bill not to waive it, I assume.
No, this wasn't
Okay.
to waive, this was to encourage the unions. And when we talked, and there's a lot of unions here, one of the things we talked about was the apprenticeship program and getting more minorities into the program. And I don't think anybody in the room could tell, other than I wasn't done it with the plumbers and, well, I did it with the sprinkler first, but,
Okay, well,
I've
let me
gone
just
to the
wrap that
union.
up though a little. I
Well-
mean, there's 2 more aldermen here that have
Okay.
questions.
I'm sorry, I'm just saying that what the president was saying is true, and maybe we need a companion bill after this, which I would be supportive of.
There is one.
So that we would come back and say how we start getting these guys into the union. I've been really working at it, even though it's a couple at a time, at least I've had the opportunity, the unions have worked with me in getting these guys in there, because I don't even think if I had the qualifications that I could get in as a union contractor, because some of them are like, you gotta put up $50,000 and all this stuff, but they've been working with the groups that I've been working with, and a few I've been working with.
Okay,
I know
Alderman
more
Boyd.
than I'm just saying.
Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions?
Sure, I have a question and comment, so thank you, Madam Chairman. Number one, I think that, the bill is gonna have unfortunate unintended consequences that would negatively impact the African American community. And I can't quantitatively give you the data to support that. I just know that with the contractors, the limited amount of minority contractors that I deal with, I see it negatively impacting them, because a lot of them don't have apprentice programs to participate in. A lot of them, for whatever reason, don't want to participate in the unions, which I'm very supportive of the unions, but I also have to look out for people that I represent as well. And I would be curious to see if there was some kind of disparity study done to show how it can negatively impact African Americans. I'm curious to know how many African American companies out there have an apprentice program versus those who don't have an apprentice program. I'm concerned that the bill doesn't have a monetary limit where it would kick in, as I heard Alderman Cruz and maybe suggested that was kind of deleted out of here. I'm curious as to how much money the city of St. Louis spends on public works projects. And currently, right now, how many bids have been awarded to unions? I would suggest that quite a few have been awarded to unions because they have a good standard, they provide quality work. Most companies that can do the bonding and have all the capacity are, from what I understand, union contractors. If we want to create a jobs bill, we need to create a jobs bill that supports a community that is suffering from jobs. The city of St. Louis is about half and half, minority and white. And if we're gonna do a jobs bill, we need to be telling the public, here's why we're doing it. Because we wanna support this community that really needs jobs. And that's not what we're doing right now. We're just putting this bill forward and we're moving it down the road. Now, I can support a bill if it has all the right data in it to support why we're doing it. I just personally, as an African American living in the community that I represent that's predominantly African American, don't see how this is a jobs bill for the community that I represent. I'm not trying to oppose the bill. I think the bill is going to have unintended consequences. I think we should spend more time dealing with this. No, please, Joe. I'm sorry, Alderman Vaccaro. I'm curious to know where's the director of Board of Public Service? Why is he not at the hearing? How does it impact his office to administer what we're trying to change? Matter of fact, let me ask you that question.
Well, you can answer it. I've been
Just that
sending all
one
this,
question.
I've been answering.
Just that one question.
All this stuff's been sent up, and I haven't gotten any answers.
Okay.
So,
Well,
you know, and this was
Okay.
never meant to be a jobs bill.
okay. Well, that's what I heard. I'm sorry. I came in at the tail end, and I heard someone say something about it was creating jobs. I think the president said something about it's creating jobs. That's where I got it from.
Not creating jobs, but the people that are on the ground, there will be more diversity in that workforce. And right now, we're not seeing it. We're not seeing
Right,
it,
and
so
we're probably
whatever.
not gonna see it with this bill. I'm with Alderman Moore's comment. I appreciate what he said because I do share Martin Luther King, and the company was TGB. And certainly I saw the same, I saw no African Americans. But what I liked about his comment, he said he made a phone call and it was 5 of them put on the job. Now, I'm willing to bet they weren't hired as permanent employees. They might have been independent contractors, you know, which was a quick fix to make the community feel better about what they're seeing in their neighborhoods.
That's correct.
So again, that's an unintended consequence of eliminating that opportunity by having that particular language in the bill.
Well, here's the thing, and I think we need to work on adjusting that language, and I've had several conversations about the best way to adjust that language. But we also need to realize that when we relax those standards, it's hurting the guy at the end of the chain.
The guy you're trying
Because-
to help or hurt.
Yeah, because now that guy, they can say, well, I'm paying, the guy that's standing next to you, I'm paying him $25 an hour or $35 an hour, but you, as an independent contractor, I'm gonna pay you $10 an hour or $12 an hour because.
With no benefits.
With no benefits because you are an independent contractor and I don't have that same requirement as you. Now, when we all drive by the work site, we say, "Ooh,
Yeah,
look,
looks good."
they have minority participation on job." And then the minute that thing is over, the second it's over, boom, that person is dumped, right? At no benefits, anything else along the way. And we have to find a way to plug that gaping, hole that they continue to escape
Right.
through.
Mr. President, I've been down here 12 years and I've had good conversation with unions. And some of the challenges that I'm told, and when they get a chance to speak, they can correct me if I'm wrong, is they have problems trying to get qualified minorities into their program.
I think there are qualified
So-
minorities out there.
Well,
I
let
think
them
we have to
dispute
do a
what I'm
better
saying.
job of recruiting.
Mr.
and
President,
until we-
please.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what I've heard from some of the unions, and they can dispute what I'm saying. But that has been a challenge for a lot of the units of getting good applicants qualified and into their program. So if they can't get into the program, how do we possibly expect that we're gonna have this open opportunity for a lot of African American contractors doing work for the city of St. Louis? And I don't mean to be argumentative in anything that I'm saying. I'm raising questions. So I want to elevate people's conscience to really think about what we're doing, because what scares me is that you will pass a bill out of committee today with this assumption that we're going to do a floor substitute and it's going to make it all right. And process is everything to me, and I don't think that's a good public policy to make a move like that. I'm disappointed that for whatever reason, MCI is not at the table, MOCAN is not at the table. People who know better than I do, and better than you do, and better than most of us at the table, how these contractors will be impacted. So I'm just saying all this to raise the question and the conscience for everybody, because for me, it concerns me. The unintended consequences really concerns me, and I just don't see how it's going to create many jobs in the African American community. And I don't want to just support something to be a nice guy. You know, I want to make sure it's being responsible. Thank you.
And you would,
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll come back to you. Alderman Ogilvy, do you have any questions?
Just briefly, yeah. I mean, my comment is, I think we probably, the point of consensus is that we want qualified contractors working on public works projects. I think we should probably all agree on that, and I think most of the time we get that. Some of the time we don't necessarily get that currently. There's a lot of conversation about the 50/50 sidewalk program. You know, my impression of that program is that it's grossly mismanaged at the city level. The streets department is mismanaging it, and we have had, in some cases, very qualified contractors doing the work, and in some cases, less qualified contractors doing the work. But in both cases, the customer experience was bad, the resident experience was bad, because the streets department does a poor job managing that program, communicating with residents when things happen, communicating with us when things happen. And regardless of who the contractor is, we're not gonna have quality customer service, and so the streets department changes the way they manage the program, and there are dozens of examples across the country of better ways to do it. Then a couple just specific questions I wanted to ask. One is about, I understand the apprenticeship program only applies to construction projects because it's just in that section. We have some projects that are sort of, they tend to be smaller projects, but they sort of are design and build projects where we may hire, we could use the one example of where you and I partnered on the signage program. That was essentially designed, built, and installed all by the same contractor. They clearly don't have an apprenticeship program, but they were also one of the only bidders on the project. Are we gonna run into issues where we hire a firm to sort of scope a project and design the project? Clearly this won't be huge construction projects, but these little things, and then we have to rebid the installation of that or something, because then we're into the construction realm. So that's one question. The other question is about subcontractors. I mean, we've had some conversation about this. I wonder if we're gonna also run into some situations in the future where we've got, you know, maybe it's a major construction project. It could be, you know, a bridge project. It could be like, you know, Tucker Boulevard. These things that are big projects that BPS, that go through BPS, and things get behind schedule, or there are components of the construction work that suddenly require more people than had been anticipated. If we entirely exclude independent contractors, are we gonna create delays within big projects because we can't get the manpower to complete the work? So that's another question I have
And we
in the
can
future. Thanks.
change it before it hits the floor to not eliminate I don't think we need to eliminate subcontractors. I do think subcontractors need to fall under the same OSHA training and things like that. I think they at least need to be qualified, because, you know, if we take someone who, in the case of, and I'll just keep going back to sewer rental, because my most horrible experience has been there. So if you have a contractor who has a master drain layers, and he hires 12 of his buddies as subcontractors to go out and do 12 jobs at a lesser price, alls I would say then, those 12 subcontractors should have OSHA training, should have at least have some, you know, they should have some, you know, they need to at least fall in the same thing as a contractor. So I don't know, we need to eliminate them, but I think we need to say that they need to follow the same set of rules as the contractor, which would be, you know.
Right, I should have used the term independent contractors when I said
Well,
subcontractors,
subs,
but yeah.
independent.
Two different things.
Two different things,
Yes,
right.
yeah,
Two different things,
but
completely.
But independent contractors are completely excluded via the languages in this bill. So we won't, I mean, maybe that'll have some benefits, but I also think we have to acknowledge it'll have some negative consequences at some point in the future.
I just think all the contractors need to follow and know what they're doing. I mean, that's just, you know, whether it's independent, sub, whatever, I think the intent is to make sure that anybody doing the job is qualified to do the job.
Thanks.
Alderwoman Ingrassia.
Thank you. Just to Alderman Ogilvy's point, I'm curious, because I haven't been down here very long, but the backups at BPS are a huge issue for me. Is it due to lack of qualified bidders, or is it just issues within the department itself?
That's another question.
I can answer that, because I know why my sidewalks haven't been done in 2 years.
We're gonna move on. I have some serious problems with our sidewalks. The voters in the 8th Ward,
Contractors are
on these even numbered years, have a serious problem with us.
they're unqualified.
Yeah, right.
They're unqualified.
Okay, we're moving on, everybody.
Period.
Have we gotten all of the aldermen in the room? Okay. Is there any members of the public that have a comment on this bill?
It's going around again.
I-
In order.
Are there any comments?
Do you have any questions?
I got a couple comments.
If you would come on up and sit at the end.
Our council needs to know who you are, so we can.
Yeah. Keith Taylor, I'm a representative of Carpenters Union. Been a member of the Carpenters Union since 1974. Just a little background.
Go ahead and have a
Yeah,
seat.
little background about myself. You're talking about diversity, I hear me, I'm not diverse, but my mother comes from Oklahoma on a Indian reservation, and my father comes from Tennessee, where his father worked for the Civilian Conservation Corps. So, a little diversity in itself right there. They met up. My mother had to move from Oklahoma because of a violent scene with her father, and she moved in with her aunt in St. Louis at 12 years old. And then they met, got married when they turned 18, worked down at the cafeteria, Form's cafeteria, where they met. She moved on, was very successful in real estate. We stayed together. My father was in construction. I moved up the ladder into a construction company in home building. That's when I came in and started working for that company, which was out in West County. We moved around from St. Louis down to Maplewood. We moved over to Belleville, Illinois. Moved down to a little town called Columbia, Illinois. So I've seen a little bit of everything as a young kid. Moved around and watched everything about throughout this city and the bi-state area. Joined like I said, joined the Carpenters Union in '73 work. I became a business agent in 2000. Worked out in the residential field and been working in the city for the last 5 years. And the same problems that were out in the county are in the city. It's about jobs, it's about uplifting. But one of the things that's really out there right now, we were talking about the apprenticeship program and how important that is. Can I ask how many people in this room right now have somebody that's working in a trade? Union or non-union, in a trade?
Yes.
Okay, but not a lot. How many people push their kids to go work in the trade?
Oh, kids, yeah.
How many people push their kids? You do. Well, you're one of the few, okay? When I started in grade school and junior high, the junior high in Columbia, Illinois, had a shop. And the high school had a shop. And most of all, St. Louis School District had umpteen different trade schools in the 70s. And the county had 3, North County, South County, West County. West County got too good for it, they sold their property. There's a private school in there now. But nobody pushes for their children to become tradesmen. It's not good enough. It used to be something honored back in the 60s and 70s, and if you're going to go to college, or you're going to get the union, get the trade, make some decent money. Would have benefits. So, in regards to this bill, the section in there about the Department of Labor approved apprenticeship programs, which there's other affiliations out there that do have those. I'm not going to say they're the best that you can have, but they're out there. Some of them aren't the greatest. That's only to better the young people that are out there we're trying to push these jobs for. What's the population of the city of St. Louis right now? 325. What was it? How much has it went up in the last?
Well, things keep the way they're going.
Well, I mean,
we'll
for
have less.
one small time, it blurted up a little bit, but it keeps going down. And you have to have a reason for people to want to move back in there, and you have to have a reason for people to want to stay. And jobs and employment and a decent wage. So, that's an important reason to have that apprenticeship program in there and have companies that are willing to pay for that. And the question was, well, what about the companies that don't have any apprentices? Well, most of those companies are involved in the apprenticeship program. They just may not have any apprentices at the time. I happen to work with the carpenters, and I would be willing to bet you if I brought in a 55-year-old carpenter that was in here that was unemployed, being he was white or black, he'd blame it on the apprentice that was coming and taking his job. Because our contractors do use the apprenticeships because they use it for cheaper labor. And it's not fair for some of our journeymen, but it happens. So it's not a an exclusive club where it's all about a club. It's not that at all. And once again, I think you understand how most of the contractors work. The Carpenters Union, there's an out-of-work list, it's a referral list, it's not a hiring hall. And as an apprentice, if you can get a job working for any contractor, and we have contractors who try to push you to it, who's out right now, they're looking for you. I heard somebody talking about the Hispanic or the Latino qualifications that have to be for the minorities. I was involved in one of those already this last year down in Ballpark Village. I got a call from the superintendent on the job, said I need minorities on this company from coming out of town. The retractable roof that's up on top of Ballpark Village came from Canada. And when that guy came in, they put the onus of the minority participation on this guy from Canada. So the superintendent of the general contractor helped to do that, but since the general contractor had not qualified his Hispanic workforce, he put it on that Canadian contractor, who in turn turned it over to the Carpenters Union, and we did come up with the 5 Hispanic guys that he had that he needed. We didn't go down to some place and pull them up like we were talking about as independent contractors. We have the guys, we have everybody, we send letters out to all of our employees, our members. Do you want to classify yourself as a minority? But some guys take offense to that. Some do. Don't want anybody to because it's an opportunity. I have one guy that I know that lives in Columbia, Illinois, and when I looked at his thing, it said Asian Pacific American, and I said, this is not right. And you're lying. Okay? And he was. He just wrote that down because it was an opportunity for him to get a job. But when it comes to the apprenticeship programs, it's important for everybody. It's important for the community. The word gets around. You got young kids around there that they can make a decent living. they can start out with at least about $14 an hour in their pocket. And I think that's about most of the trades, $14 to $18 starting out, and with the benefit program. Too many times, I think right now, our young people are going out and seeing the easy ways to make money. And if I was told I could go to work as a day laborer and get 18 bucks an hour and not have to pay any taxes, I guess I'd jump on that too. I just wanted to touch on that. And the independent contractors, I just want to make it clear, it's not a contractor that isn't a part of an association, that I think is in the language right there, because we have the AGC, and you have the HBA, and you have the Black Trade Unions groups, okay? They're all associations that everybody pays. And then we have independent contractors within our group that don't belong to those associations. We've got a contract for Southern Illinois, for St. Louis, it's called the MIG. It's called, Missouri Independent Contractors. They don't pay into that association fund. They pay into the apprenticeship fund, and they hold their own surety bond, which isn't coming up with $25,000 or $50,000. It's simply an insurance, a surety bond. Because they don't want somebody negotiating a contract. We're talking about an association. They don't come independently, but independently as a group, they might call 3 or 4 of those contractors to negotiate a contract. We consider an independent contractor is an employee of a subcontractor or that general contractor that is taking directions from that sub or that general. When he comes in during the day, go here today, go over there tomorrow, or the superintendent or foreman comes by him and is instructing him what to do all day. He's not a contractor, he's an employee, and that's the language that's in that bill is what they're talking about. An actual employee that somebody's misclassifying as independent contractor. There's a lot of tax dollars to get, and if all these independent contractors weren't running around here, there'd be a lot more income in the city of St. Louis, a lot more tax dollars. It just doesn't happen in the construction business. It's terrible in the restaurant business. It's been going on for years, and it's worse now. And any of the farms out there. But I think it'd be a blessing for the city if you could do this. If you could do this right now, it would be great. There are projects that Craig's been following that are contractors, they're not independent contractors, performing some work on some public board services jobs that under their requirements, I don't know why they're still doing work for them, because they're 60 and 90 days over the completion date, and underneath their policies, those guys should be getting a hefty fine if they ever think those jobs would be done. So a lot of this is already in public board services, and I think you know that. It's a lot of enforcement that just isn't done on this project. Amen. So, if you got anything for me, please ask me questions.
All right. Are there any aldermen with questions of the speaker? Okay, Alderman Moore has got the most seniority of the hands up.
What I'm suggesting is, and I'm not motioning, is that we table this bill and get a clear bill with minority contractors' representation here, and then put in this bill also about enforcement. If we took a tour of a job site right now, we took a tour any of the ballpark village, the downtown arch ground, and we took a tour right now, if we walked on that job, all of us in this room would be embarrassed, because you would hardly find any minorities down there working. All them orange t-shirts and all them suspenders they wearing on Pine and Euclid. I went over the other day and took a picture of 20-some guys. I counted, not one of them was a minority. I would ask in this room, how many of you in this room are prejudiced? And most of you would say you're not. But if I had the opportunity to have a workforce believe me, it would be all black, and I'm not prejudiced, because I told you Craig Smith is my best friend. But it's just the way things go, and it always end up that way. When you go down there to Ballpark Village, you go anywhere, and the apprenticeship program is a joke. I am a union carpenter. I've had my own union corporation. It is a joke. If you would run a survey in my ward right now, you couldn't find 2 apprentices in 20 years that's been in this program, the apprenticeship program. And we've done everything but dance, and we don't know how to dance the jig because it's not in our rhythm. But we keep dancing and keep coming to the table, and nothing is occurring. And just like anything else, most of it is a joke. It's going to end up being nothing. So that's my opinion, is that we table this and get it clear with minority contractors sitting over there, just like you guys sitting over there with the union. And I think it's just an opportunity for the unions to continue their downslaught and their elimination of minority contractors. And that's my opinion.
Are there any other questions of this?
Yes.
It's questions now.
Yes.
Question has a question
I
mark.
understand what question is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was a question, French.
All right, Mr. Taylor, you mentioned about how you see as one of the benefits of legislation like this, creating jobs would attract people to the city. You know, you're aware that we passed legislation a few years ago to start monitoring workforce. And the intent was to really monitor minority workforce. But one interesting thing that is also noted on there is the percentage of people who work on these jobs that live in the city of St. Louis. And in many cases, is below 10%. So on these city jobs, we are creating these projects using city money, and very few city people get on these jobs. A lot of that has to do with the rules and how we award these contracts, and frankly, the residency of union membership. Most union members live in the suburbs, but they come to the city for work. And so for those of us that are focused on trying to put folks in our community to work, unfortunately, we butt heads with what the unions want a lot, because what's good for the union isn't always what's good for unemployed folks or even capable workers in my community. And I feel like this legislation is that now. As you mentioned, most of the issues that Alderman Vaccaro brought up about how projects operate now, the fault really lies on how these programs are administered. What we're talking about is poor management in BPS, poor management in the streets department, and we often find ourselves here in the Board of Aldermen trying to come up with legislation to increase the performance or to make the program work better, when really the solution is just in better management over the executive branch. And I feel like right now we're coming up with legislation to fix a problem that this isn't going to fix, and it's actually going to create more problems. So what do you think is, from your perspective and from the perspective of the Carpenters Union, which, by the way, does a better job, I think, than most unions as far as diversity and participation. But what is the essential parts of this legislation? If you agree that most of it is already under control of BPS and just how they choose to administer it, but what is essential? What is the core thing you want to see passed in there?
The section with the apprenticeship program.
The apprenticeship, that's the key part to you?
No, the apprenticeship program, you want people that are safe on your job, which is part of it. And the drug-free.
And drug-free. So, I don't think anybody...
But that should be any place you live.
Yeah, sure. And I don't think...
And I think you would want that if you're having somebody build you a new house, no matter where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
When you come up to the workforce, you don't want some guy around the back smoking a doobie. You want the right people on. I mean, I'm talking about construction in general is how it's been for the last 40 years.
Yeah, I agree.
White, black, or whoever it might be, drugs and such like that was tolerated for a long time. And it's not now because of it's not right thing to do. Okay. And for liability reasons, as a small contractor, independent contractor, what you have. You don't want anybody that's affected by drugs or alcohol working for you as a liability. And you sure don't want them on your, if you're a subcontractor, on your general contractor side, on the owner's side, or, you know, or your client. You don't want anybody around like that. And if you happen to be with a group that does have a benefit program, and you have somebody that has a problem, might be the best word you have, he's got a problem. There's a possibility he can get some help, because there's gonna be an insurance that has a program for him.
I mean, yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, I don't think anybody here is, you know, pro-high construction worker. But what we do know is that, you know, with the rules that are set up, and this is where, just so you are aware of this, I deal with this a lot when we're trying to get young people jobs, is that under the current rules, a guy who was so drunk that he couldn't even walk Saturday and Sunday, but sober Monday morning, is okay under the current rules. But a guy who smoked weed 3 weeks ago and has been sober for 3 straight weeks can't get the job.
On the drug test.
Right.
However, the guy that's drunk like that, it's not gonna work for him too long, because he's gonna be gone. He's not gonna hold the job, he's gonna end up being agreed to that program too.
But under the current rules,
I know.
he's good. So I mean, so there's some imbalance in there too, so. And, okay, so that was my only question.
Hold on, Alderman. I'm gonna let you and Carl close together.
No, I was gonna ask him one question about.
Oh, you had a question, go.
Yeah. So when you were talking about independent contractor, I mean,
I'm trying to address what I thought.
right.
You know, different ways of it.
So there may be.
Interpretation of it.
Right, there may be a way, because you talked about them, you know, like if they're getting benefits somehow, they're part of another company, they're part of an association or whatever. So there may be a way to deal with that. This is a difficult balancing act, because you're trying to make sure we don't have the situation that the president was talking about, where you look down the street, it all looks terrific, but really we're abusing people, and it's worse than anything you can imagine. It's just window dressing. So how we get to a point that these folks that everybody can be working on that job, are equally trained, getting equal benefits, all the rest of it. And you were talking about either being part of another company or being a part of an association. So that might be how to deal with that here, because I can't really think of another way. I know what we're trying to get at. I just took the language that
Oh, no,
was
I
from St.
think
Louis
that's
County.
what, when you look under what's an independent contractor definition, that's what it is.
Correct.
That's what it is.
But
in
for
a-
purposes of this legislation, there might be an exclusion if they're being protected in some fashion that you were talking about. In other words, not all independent contractors are created equal. So we address the concern that the alderman from the 4th was talking about, in terms of making sure that somebody who is getting appropriately paid and so forth. We all understand the reason why they're doing these independent contractors. It's so they can pay them nothing, and they can appear to comply with what they're supposed to comply with, but they're not really.
You could have a group of young kids that are involved in a minority workforce project, that this is a pre-apprenticeship program that they would be working through on a particular project.
Right.
To get so many hours,
So
where it could be young guys that working on their GED, don't have a GED, or trying to get up to a GED so they can get into an apprenticeship program. So almost all of them, you have to have that GED. Some of them you have to have them immediately. Others, it could be at 6 months after you're in the program. And I think that usually works best, because if the kid's got a job, he's got an incentive, he can move on. But back to the independent contractor, sometimes that minority workforce entity, it'll be through one of the groups around town here.
I'm just saying that's language that could be considered to try to address that aspect. And I didn't have that language, I just took what was in St. Louis County. It's a very difficult thing to get at, but I think the intent is to try to make sure that we're not abusing people and letting the contractor, the bidder who comes in here, reduce the price so greatly because they're not achieving what our intention is, which is to try to move people onward and upward and get fair wages in a good working condition and, you know, all of that.
You'll have in the city right now, you'll have a company, let's say they come from Tennessee. And I'll just pick on one of the little dollar stores, because this seems to be the one. So they come in from Tennessee, or from out of state, they're coming from out of state. They don't have a license in the city, they don't have a license in the state. But they know how to go by, they go through an architect that has that license. They pull the permits. They go through there. They don't bring a workforce, they go to labor rate.
Do we get their
Now,
earnings tax? Do we get earnings tax out of them?
Oh, no, you don't get anything.
Labor
The
rate,
person you
these
might
are
get
day
earnings
labor.
tax out is if he happens to go to the neighborhood labor ready store. And that's where he'll get his, you know, what's called day labor. Now, I don't think that's what anybody wants for their kids, is working for labor rate. I really don't.
That
That's
was my
that's your hard,
question.
Okay,
that's what you
I know that's your question. Let's see, we go back in reverse order, just to make sure there's nothing anybody else would like to add. Mr. President, is there anything else you would like to add?
Not the second, I mean, that's
Okay. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Alderman French, I just hit you for the second time. Anything else?
I did have a question for our sponsor. You mentioned a few times how you characterize this as only dealing with small projects. Is there anything in the legislation that says it's just for small projects?
No, but I mean, the ones that are in my mind, the ones that prompted me to.
Yeah, but these rules would also apply to large
Sure.
projects too. And so just one of my concerns is the increase in cost on large projects. So right now, this provides an opportunity for, this provides opportunity for, say we're building a new rec center or a new something somewhere down the line. They don't have to take the lowest bidder. In fact, they can give it to a much higher bidder. I think that is something that we should be concerned about.
It just depends, again, I'll go back to what the president said, we can keep the jobs really cheap if we pay minorities or whoever $10 an hour and only give the, you know.
We already have prevailing wage law.
Well, no, I'm just saying though, that the thing is we're trying to make sure the job's done with quality, not just.
I understand, but I'm just saying that there is obviously a
Sure,
fiscal
then
cost to this, and
There
it
should
should be a
cost
fiscal note.
more, yeah, there should cost more. I believe.
Project's gonna cost.
Mr. President?
Yeah, one of the, I know there's a number of changes and alterations and amendments that are being looked at on this bill. And one of the ones that we've discussed is putting a cap so that not every job would fall under this. It may put it at, $250,000 and below, that those jobs would not fall under this. So it would be, those mid-sized to larger projects. And then that gives an opportunity to get the thing implemented and moving. We also, I know there's some recommendations of some other changes that people are looking at for the bill that would take into account some of the concerns some of the committee members had today. Because certainly, and I don't know if, who would be in favor of, limiting opportunities to minority and women-owned businesses and minority and women in particular, because, certainly it would not meet just the first page of this thing where it says we need to have a, diverse, workforce that's reflective of our city. Question is how we get there. We know that what we're doing right now is not working at all. It's just not working, right? We have to find a way to raise the bar of everybody, including organized labor, the construction businesses and everybody else involved, so that at the end of the day, there's some true opportunities open for people who live here and people within your communities. I think at the end of the day, we've tried policy changes. That's not happening. You've heard already today, the Board of Public Service. There are, policies and things that are on the books that are not being implemented today. But ultimately, to get there, it's gonna take some legislative action. And this begins to approach some of that.
All right.
So Joe, the question to you is, would you be looking to still try to pass it out today, or would you wanna take a week for those other amendments,
no
or
reason
do it
why.
on the floor
Well, even
with
if,
the floor substitute?
I'd rather try to pass it out today. I'd like to meet with everybody to try to work on the floor substitute, because it's gonna take a bigger threshold on the floor anyway, 15. And we can have 3 board meetings like this and talk for 10 hours and change this around. It's still gonna be debated out on the floor for, a really long meeting. And if we put it with a couple other bills, we might as well pack dinner and lunch. I talked to people and told me that they were fine with it, and I'm hoping they're still supportive of it, to get it out of committee. And then, once it's out of committee, I'm willing to sit down and meet, because it's not gonna pass out on the floor if we don't make some changes.
Based on just the discussion today, we will have to have a complete, thorough in floor substitute. So even if we got to doing all the amendments today, I would imagine we'll be here several hours. I think that if we had a good floor substitute that would take into account some of the things that we've heard here today, that ends up opening up opportunities for people, plug in some of the gaps that are being exploited today, I think it'll be a good bill.
And I agree with that. I just know that, we need to work on it. I know that we only have a handful of meetings left. So when it gets past this.
You'll have a week.
Right. Well, I thought if I can get it past this phase, again, I'm willing to work on a floor substitute. I'm willing to call in whoever everybody wants to call in.
Well, it looks like the 2 issues so far is the contract size and get with.
Independent
I think about this independent contractor language.
And I don't think
Way
there's
to
an
do
issue
that
on,
without,
I don't think there's an issue on
without
putting a
taking
cap on
opportunity.
it. I don't think that I even have an issue on putting a cap.
Okay.
But on the independent contractor side, we need to work the language where it does not seem to take away opportunities that exist today, right? So we'll have to find a way to work that through,
Sure.
so that at the end of the day, it ends up being.
And I can tell you that that's gonna take,
It's gonna take some time.
right, and, I'll need Craig, Dave, and anybody else I can get my hands on.
Probably need
You
these two.
know, I would love it. Well, I would take it until anybody that's willing to wanna meet, rather than have to do it in committee, just keep meeting, bringing in whoever everybody wants. I'm willing to work out a reasonable floor substitute,
Okay.
as long as the intent of the bill is.
We're still going in kind of reverse order, but Alderman Carter, I'm gonna go backwards, reverse order to pick you up.
Yeah. And so I think that things should happen the total opposite way of what Joe wants them to happen. I think that we should bring those folks to the table now, have those discussions, clean up the bill, and move forward. I don't think that time or anything else should stop us from coming out of this committee with a nice, clean bill. So I think we need another week or so to digest this and to bring other groups to the table to talk about the problems with language and talk about the different possibilities of change.
Alderman Williamson. Alderman Moore.
I'm next to Chris.
I'm
He's going
going in
backwards.
reverse order,
I got
and
my-
Mr.
They
Francis.
boosted me up.
Let's go backwards.
I'm going in reverse order today.
Wow. Privilege.
That's intentional.
Gentlemen, Alderman Moore here is speaking.
I stammer and stutter enough, so it's hard hearing getting what I'm saying. But again, I want to say that I think that we should table it and come back because I think that if we put it on the floor for a floor substitute, it's gonna be drug all out. We'll be there for 9 or 10 hours trying to get it figured out what we're gonna do, and I think this, while we're in committee, we get it out and then present it, especially have the minority inclusion, those representatives, and also put enforcement in there as to who's gonna monitor and enforce these rules and new rules and regulations. I'm for anything that's gonna keep minorities working, especially the minority contractors that's worked with Mike Woodland. Not particularly Rallo, but, there are some contractors out there that, need to work, especially on the workforce, and I do a lot of concrete, I don't do 50-50 programs in my ward. I pay for the sidewalk for my constituents. And we use all the money, for the mayor take the money and put it back in the general revenue fund, so I spend it all. So I definitely need a workforce out there, but I want them to look like people of the, represent the people of the community, because my constituents get on the phone and they just say to me plain and simple, what you doing with all the white boys out there working in the communities? So I have to make sure that I'm covered in this, and I think that another week wouldn't hurt, Joe. Get MoCan and whoever else, I can and we can, and get them all in here and talk to them about having them sitting over there with the union, so that when we can get this thing ironed out and get it moved along quickly. Do you think you're out of time?
No, the only reason, okay, so 2 years ago, I went to the same thing. Matt Villa was the chair of public safety, and MoCan brought in like a whole bunch of people. The union brought in a whole bunch of people, and after almost 6 or 8 hours of testimony, I don't know who else was on the committee, but it was 6 or 8 hours of one group saying this, one group saying that, going back and forth. We never did accomplish anything other than just to stall the bill.
I think we're somewhere now. But think about it, you were talking about a few years ago, I'm talking about a lifetime, for me, of 40 years or more, that I've been to the table and nothing has occurred. So I think we're working on something. We have something here that we, with a little more meat involved, there's a little more on the table. The crumb, that's what we get all the time. You just come in and you put your paper down and it blow off the table. Everything's off the table. So we have something in here that we can work with, and we're not gonna have no can coming in here with a bunch of folks and taking up all the time, because when they hit that floor and we're not prepared out of committee, it's gonna just be more delays. So I think we should clean it up a little bit, and I would support you. As much as I hate to, but I would. You know, because I hope we get something out of the deal, you know, and I don't want it to be said that I helped kill a bill that might have helped my people. But
Alderwoman Behringer.
I wasn't through.
Oh, okay. Don't pause so long. Go ahead.
I'm finished.
Alderwoman Behringer.
The only thing I want to say is, since I've been down here and we've been working on the minority and trying to improve the minority and raising the numbers, I made it my mission to find out why we're not reaching the numbers we should be reaching. And one of the things that happened was they built the Construction Career Academy here in the city of St. Louis. Well, Career Construction Academy opened, but then the next thing that happened was they weren't able to graduate the number of students that they'd like to. So then you gotta drill it down again. So you drill down again, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening? There are no math skills, because I wanna see the Construction and Career Academy get the kids who live in the city of St. Louis into the construction careers. I worked at St. Cecilia. St. Cecilia's works to get the children from grade school into private high schools, but the kids who weren't going into the private high schools, I worked with Michael Zambrana to move them towards the trades, so we'd have more Latinos in the trades. But the point I'm trying to get to is you have to have the math skills. And in the city of St. Louis, we have to push the education. We have to push that needle, because the math skills have to be there. You have to have math to be a plumber. You have to have math to be in any of these trades. So now we're drilling it down even further. And whether you all are aware or not, in the early childhood education, we're doing STEM training in child care centers that are in areas of North City that if we weren't in there, they wouldn't get it. STEM is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And we have to keep pushing this early childhood program in the city of St. Louis, because 90% of the brain's functioning is done by the age of 3. So if we're going to actually make it so that all the kids that are going here and living in the city of St. Louis have what they need, which is the mathematics, we have to work with the educational system here in the city of St. Louis. And that's why I want it, and I've worked very hard to see that our public schools are doing better, and I meet with Calvin Adams, I meet with these different schools, because I believe we can get there, but we have to be pushing it, and that is, to me, is key. We've got to work on STEM in the city of St. Louis.
By the age of 3.
Yes, right there. There's another early childhood
Yes,
advocate right there.
true.
It's 90% of your brain by the age of 3. We have kindergarten readiness started in the city of St. Louis, and we have to make sure it stays.
Alderwoman Cruzen.
Gosh, I hate to hear that 90% at the age of 3.
Well, we're losing it at least my age. I'm going to lose it.
Apparently, I must be too. Well, I guess my comment is I would like to vote for a version of this bill. I'd like to hear, though, from the city councilor, from BPS, from MOCAN or Minority Business Construction Entity. We've spent almost 2.5 hours debating this bill, just in committee. There are, 9 of us on the committee and 3 or 4 more people that were here. And so we've spent, so I don't think doing it on the floor is a very good way to do it. Because I think there need to be some changes, but I think, you've gotten a lot of feedback today. Everybody has, so perhaps there could be some changes, and then we could actually vote the bill out of committee, and take it to the floor in a clean way. So that would just be my suggestion on how to handle this.
Alderman, I hadn't recognized you yet. I think the 2 considerations that have been brought is a cap, or a below exemption size, and the better language with the independent contractor.
And apprentice.
And I think that Alderman Vaccaro is very sincere about what he does, and we will be able to judge him and the floor substitute that he might bring to us. Having said that, I would move that we pass out of committee with a 2-pass recommendation, committee substitute for board bill number 221.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded, the committee substitute for board bill number 221 come out of committee with a 2-pass recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Cruzen.
Pass.
Alderman Behringer.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson. Alderman Moore.
Pass.
Alderman French.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Carter.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
Pass.
Chairman Conway.
Aye.
President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cruzen.
Pass. Is that a motion?
Yes. Vice Chairman Williamson. Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cruzen.
Get a third time at it? Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson. 7 aye votes, 2 no votes. Board Bill 221 committee substitute comes out with a
And members of the committee, I truly do believe that between Alderman Schmidt and Alderman Vaccaro, they will address those issues in the floor substitute argument. We won't be moving on. Thank you.